The first explosion had been minor, just a power coupling in the auxiliary life support system. Alex Rider had been through worse. But the second explosion, the one that had taken out his navigation system and half the starboard thrusters, that one had been problematic. EDI, status report, Alex called out, his hands dancing over the manual controls as the rusty comet lurched through the uncharted nebula. Calculating odds of survival, Captain, replied the artificial intelligence in its perpetually unimpressed voice. Current assessment, dismally low but not technically zero. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Alex muttered, wiping sweat from his brow as warning lights flickered across his console. The cargo hauler was living up to the rusty part of its name today. Through the viewport, a planet emerged from the swirling gases of the nebula. Azure blue with floating islands suspended in its atmosphere, connected by what looked like bridges of pure light. It wasn't on any of his charts, but at this point any landing pad would do. EDI scanned that planet. Breathable atmosphere. Atmosphere composition is within acceptable parameters for human survival. However, I am detecting unusual energy signatures in... The ship jolted violently as another system failed. Save the science lesson for later, Alex interrupted. We're going in. The rusty comet screamed through the atmosphere, parts of its hull glowing red-hot. Alex's muscles strained against the controls, trying to guide the dying ship toward what looked like a flat meadow on one of the floating islands. With a final prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening, Alex braced for impact. The landing, if one could call it that, left a kilometer-long scar across the meadow, ending with the rusty comet half-buried in strange, iridescent vegetation. But miraculously, Alex was alive. Ship status? He croaked, unbuckling himself from the pilot's seat. The rusty comet is now officially the completely immobile comet, EDI replied. Primary systems offline. Secondary systems offline. Tertiary systems wishing they were offline. Communications dead. However, the coffee maker in the galley appears to be functional, which seems like an ironic cosmic joke. Alex grabbed his multi-tool from its charging station and strapped it to his forearm. The device, which contained EDI's mobile interface, scanner, translator, and basic repair functions, was his lifeline on strange worlds. At least we're on solid ground, Alex said, making his way to the emergency exit. Technically, we're on a floating island suspended several kilometers above the actual ground, EDI corrected. But I suppose plummeting to our deaths is no longer our most immediate concern. Alex popped the hatch and climbed out into alien sunlight. The air was clean and crisp, almost sweet-tasting, and the gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth standard. Around him, plants unlike any he'd seen before swayed gently, some changing colors and rhythmic patterns, others seeming to communicate with each other through pulses of light. Fascinating, EDI commented from the multi-tool. The flora appears to use bioluminescence as a form of communication. The botanical equivalent of gossip, perhaps. And right now, I believe they're all talking about you. Alex surveyed the damage to his ship. It was bad. Without replacement parts and a fully equipped dock, the rusty comet wouldn't be flying again anytime soon. EDI, scan for any signs of civilization, preferably the kind that won't immediately try to eat me. Scanning. I'm detecting a settlement approximately 3 kilometers east. Advanced technology. No indications of hostile intent, though my database contains almost no information about this world. It appears to be called Xylos, and it's listed as... Oh, that's not encouraging. What? Isolationist. Ritualistic. Xenophobic is the word that comes to mind, though the data is fragmentary. Travelers are advised to respect local customs to an almost paranoid degree. Great, Alex sighed. Any guidance on what those customs might be? None whatsoever. The entry was apparently written by someone who left in a great hurry, or possibly never left at all. After securing what supplies he could salvage, Alex set off toward the settlement. The path wove between floating botanical gardens that seemed to observe him with a quiet intelligence. In the distance, he could see towers of what looked like obsidian crystal rising into the clouds, connected by those mysterious bridges of light. As he drew closer, Alex got his first glimpse of the inhabitants. The Xylans were tall, most standing at least 7 feet, with willowy frames that moved with impossible grace. Their skin resembled polished obsidian, inlaid with geometric patterns that glowed and shifted colors in response to their emotions. They wore minimal clothing made of materials that seemed both liquid and solid, flowing around their bodies like living things. Alex kept to the shadows, observing before making contact. The Xylans moved with precise, almost ritualistic motions, their greetings to one another involving elaborate hand gestures and the exchange of small, glowing crystals. Their society appears highly ceremonial, EDI observed quietly. Each interaction follows a strict protocol. Idebija extrema caution. These aren't the handshake and howdy type. Noted, Alex whispered. But we need parts, or at least help. I'm going to have to make contact eventually. Perhaps observe a bit longer. The consequences of a faux pas here might be more severe than the usual diplomatic incident. But fate had other plans. As Alex skirted the edge of what appeared to be a public square, he found himself caught in a sudden flow of Xylans. They were gathering for some kind of ceremony, their patterns glowing in synchronized pulses of blue and silver. At the center of the square stood a raised dais of crystal, where a figure that outshone all others awaited. She was clearly royalty. Her obsidian skin bore more intricate patterns than any other Xylan, and they shifted through colors Alex hadn't seen on the others. Deep purples, cosmic blues, and flashes of gold. Around her neck hung a complex array of crystals that caught the light in hypnotic ways. But what struck Alex most was her expression. Beneath the ceremonial serenity, he glimpsed something like restlessness, perhaps even trapped frustration. That appears to be Princess Lyra, EDI whispered, having apparently found some scraps of information in its database. Daughter of the stellar monarch, highly educated, skilled in the manipulation of Xylan energy fields, and, if I'm interpreting these patterns correctly, currently participating in some form of selection ritual. The princess had begun a complex series of movements, her hands weaving patterns in the air while crystals floated around her, responding to her gestures. The crowd watched in respectful silence as she approached various Xylan males, presenting a pulsing crystal to each, only to take it back after some unspoken assessment. Alex pressed himself deeper into the shadows, knowing this was exactly the sort of situation he should avoid. Unfortunately, that's when one of his emergency rations, a protein bar he'd stuffed hastily into his pocket, chose to slip out and clatter onto the crystal pathway. The sound, though tiny, seemed to echo in the ceremonial silence. Several Xylans turned, their patterns shifting to alarmed oranges and reds. And somehow, impossibly, the princess looked directly at him. Their eyes met across the square, and in that moment, Alex made the first of many mistakes. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward to retrieve his fallen item, accidentally crossing into the ceremonial space. The crowd parted in shock. Whispers rippled through the gathering as the princess's guards, tall Xylans with armor that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, tensed but did not advance, apparently unsure how to handle this unprecedented breach of protocol. The princess herself, however, did not seem afraid. Her patterns shifted to curious purples and blues as she studied this strange alien who had interrupted her ceremony. Then, to the visible shock of the assembled Xylans, she approached Alex. Hi, Alex said lamely, raising a hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Sorry about the interruption. I'm just passing through. Crashed my ship, actually. EDI frantically translated as best it could, though the multi-tools database contained only fragments of the Xylan language. Captain, I strongly recommend backing away slowly. This level of direct contact with royalty is likely taboo, but the princess was already before him, her height forcing Alex to look up. Up close, her features were both alien and beautiful, angular and perfect, with eyes that contained swirling galaxies of silver and violet. She spoke, her voice like crystal wind chimes, the multi-tool struggling to translate. You have stepped into the celestial pairing ritual, off-worlder. Such an interruption has not occurred in 7 cycles of the stellar confluence. Before Alex could apologize again, the princess held out the same pulsing crystal she had presented to the other candidates, a piece of translucent material that seemed to contain a miniature storm of energy within. "I don't understand," Alex said, staring at the offered crystal. "She appears to be including you in the ritual," EDI whispered urgently. "Though whether as courtesy or challenge, I cannot determine." Alex hesitated. His trader's handbook had a chapter on first contact protocols, but nothing specific to this situation. He vaguely remembered something about reciprocal gift-giving being important on some worlds. "Maybe I should offer something in return?" he whispered to EDI. "That seems logical, though I cannot guarantee." Before EDI could finish, Alex unclasped his multi-tool and held it out to the princess, intending only to show it to her as a gesture of technological exchange. But she reached out and touched it, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. The crystal in her other hand flared brilliantly, bathing them both in radiant light. The crowd gasped collectively, their patterns all flashing to the same startled white. "What just happened?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible over the sudden swell of what sounded like ceremonial music. "Calculating," EDI replied, now speaking from the ship's remote connection since the multi-tool was in the princess's hands. "Analyzing cultural context and ceremonial significance." Oh dear what? "Congratulations, Captain. You have achieved some form of undefined social protocol. Probability of imminent awkwardness, 98.7%. The princess's patterns had shifted to a deep, royal purple interlaced with gold. She handed the multi-tool back to Alex and spoke again, her voice now carrying a formal tone that even the incomplete translation couldn't miss. "The celestial gears have turned. The off-worlder has fulfilled the astral symmetry. The pairing is acknowledged." The guards who had been tense moments before now formed a ceremonial circle around Alex and the princess. Not threatening, but containing. "EDI," Alex whispered, cold realization beginning to dawn. "Please tell me I didn't just accidentally get engaged to an alien princess. I would prefer not to make definitive statements about matters beyond my knowledge parameters," EDI replied diplomatically. "But based on contextual analysis, ceremonial music, the crowd's reaction, and the guards now escorting you to what appears to be a royal tower." "Yes, Captain, you did exactly that." The walk to the royal tower was the longest of Alex's life, despite being physically quite short. The princess, Lyra, as EDI had identified her, walked beside him, maintaining a formal distance while the guards formed a protective circle around them. The Xylan citizens they passed bowed deeply, their patterns displaying what Alex could only interpret as shock, curiosity, and in some cases, outrage. "EDI," Alex whispered to his multi-tool, which he'd thankfully reclaimed. "Options? Limited, Captain. We are being escorted by elite royal guards to the seat of power. Attempting to flee would likely be interpreted as a grave insult at best, and at worst." "Got it. So I play along until I figure this out. A prudent approach. Though I feel compelled to point out that your record with prudence thus far has been suboptimal." The royal tower up close was even more imposing than it had appeared from a distance. It wasn't a single structure, but a complex of interlocking crystals that seemed to grow from one another, rising at impossible angles into the sky. The interior was hollowed out into vast chambers with ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness, walls lined with luminescent patterns that shifted slowly, perhaps telling stories or keeping records. Alex was led to a chamber that, despite its alien design, was clearly some sort of receiving room. High-ranking Xylans waited inside, their patterns displaying varying degrees of agitation. One in particular stood out, a male Xylan whose patterns pulsed with barely contained fury beneath a veneer of diplomatic control. "Lest you run short of complications," EDI murmured, "that would be Lord Kalen. According to fragments I've managed to translate from the patterns on the wall, He was the frontrunner in the celestial pairing ritual before your untimely interruption. Great. Not only had Alex accidentally gotten engaged to a princess, but he'd also managed to politically outmaneuver a local lord in the process. His day was getting better by the minute. Kalen approached, his movements precise and controlled to a degree that somehow made them more threatening than any overt aggression could have been. The cosmic balance watches with interest, he said, the translation coming through with chilling clarity. An off-worlder, untouched by the stellar confluence, steps into our most sacred ritual and claims the astral symmetry. His patterns briefly flashed a deep crimson before settling back into controlled blues. Most unusual. Look, this is all a misunderstanding, Alex began. I didn't mean to claim any symmetry or whatever. I was just. Intention is secondary to cosmic pattern. Another Xylan interrupted, this one apparently some sort of advisor or minister. The celestial gears have turned. The pairing has been acknowledged. Preparations must commence. And with that cryptic pronouncement, Alex found himself whisked away by a new group of Xylans, servants, judging by their simpler pattern work. The princess disappeared down another corridor, leaving Alex alone with his new entourage and an increasingly concerned EDI. Preparations? Alex asked warily as he was led into a new chamber. What kind of preparations? He soon found out. The next several hours were a crash course in Xylan royal protocols, beginning with what they called a harmonic cleansing, essentially a bath, but one involving no water. Instead, Alex was directed to stand in a chamber where sound waves of varying frequencies pulsed around him, somehow removing every speck of dirt from his body while simultaneously leaving his hair standing in all directions like he'd been electrocuted. Next came clothing. The Xylan garments were constructed of that same impossible material he'd noticed before, partially solid, partially liquid, and apparently responsive to the wearer's emotional state. This proved particularly awkward for Alex, as his confusion and anxiety caused the royal attire to ripple and shift in ways that the attending servants found either concerning or amusing, though it was hard to tell which. EDI translation status? Alex whispered during a brief moment alone. Improving incrementally. I've been cross-referencing observed behaviors with the pattern language on the walls. It appears the celestial pairing ritual is a tradition dating back millennia, designed to ensure proper energy resonance between royal partners. Energy resonance? What does that even mean? Unknown. However, it appears the ritual is considered unbreakable once initiated, except through another, even more complex ritual called the Soul Challenge. Oh, and congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. Should I prepare a gift registry? This isn't funny EDI. Humor is a coping mechanism, Captain. And at present, coping seems advisable. The preparations continued with increasingly bewildering ritual lessons. Alex was taught the proper way to eat with crystalline utensils that hummed when touched incorrectly, which was often how to walk with the precise gait expected of royal consorts. Apparently his natural walk was barbarically asymmetrical, and the basics of Xylan court etiquette, which seemed to involve endless prohibitions on speaking out of turn. Just when Alex thought he couldn't absorb another bizarre custom, the servants abruptly bowed and exited his chamber. Moments later, Princess Lyra herself entered. Up close and in the relative privacy of the royal chambers, she seemed different, less the untouchable deity and more a person, albeit an extraordinarily regal one. Her patterns had settled into a more contemplative blue, with occasional flickers of curious purple when she looked at him. "You are uncomfortable," she said, her voice now being translated more smoothly by EDI, which had been quietly updating its language database. "That's one way of putting it," Alex replied carefully. "Where I come from, people usually date for a while before getting engaged, and they definitely ask permission first." Date? The word didn't translate properly, causing confusion in Lyra's patterns. Court each other, get to know each other, see if they're compatible. Understanding dawned in Lyra's expression. You refer to the primitive method of partner selection. On Xylos, the celestial gears determine compatibility. The ritual merely formalizes what the cosmos has already decided. With all due respect, Princess, the cosmos didn't decide anything. I accidentally walked into your ceremony and tried to be polite. Alex ran a hand through his still wild hair. Can't we just call it off? Explain the mistake. Lyra's patterns darkened with what might have been concern or possibly offense. The pairing ritual cannot simply be called off. It is sacred, public, and binding. To withdraw now would bring shame upon my house and destabilize the stellar confluence itself. So, I'm stuck in an engagement I never agreed to because of politics. Not merely politics. For the first time, a hint of vulnerability showed in Lyra's patterns. The ritual is our most sacred tradition. Breaking it would suggest either that the cosmic order is flawed or that the royal house is too weak to maintain it. Either would be problematic for my people. Alex stared at her, finally seeing past the alienness to recognize something familiar. A person trapped by duty and expectation, perhaps even more than he was. There is, Lyra continued hesitantly, one alternative, the soul challenge. An ancient rite to dissolve an incompatible pairing, but is dangerous, public, and rarely invoked. Dangerous how? It tests not merely physical capability, but spiritual resonance. Many have been injured. Some have not survived. So my choices are forced marriage or trial by combat. Fantastic. Alex sighed heavily. Look, Princess. Lyra, she corrected, her patterns shifting slightly. If we are to be paired, you should use my name. Lyra, Alex amended. I'm not from your world. I don't share your beliefs. I crashed here by accident. There has to be a better solution than either of us being trapped in an unwanted arrangement. Something in his words caused Lyra's patterns to flicker with an emotion Alex couldn't identify. Is the arrangement so unwanted then? She asked quietly. Am I so repulsive to your species? Alex blinked, caught off guard by the question. What? No, you're actually... He stopped himself, realizing he was about to admit finding an alien princess objectively beautiful, which seemed like dangerous territory. That's not the point. We don't know each other, and I can't stay here forever. I have a ship to repair, cargo to deliver, a life elsewhere. For a moment, Lyra's patterns displayed something that might have been disappointment before returning to their formal configuration. I understand. We will explore options. But until then, we must maintain appearances. The challenge, if it comes to that, requires preparation. We must spend time together, learn each other's patterns, participate in preliminary rituals. More rituals, Alex muttered. Wonderful. It is our way, Lyra replied, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Perhaps, while learning our customs, you might share some of yours. I have studied off-world cultures, though never encountered them directly. Your presence here, however unintended, represents a unique opportunity. The request was so unexpected, so normal in its curiosity, that Alex found himself smiling despite everything. I suppose that's fair. Cultural exchange between reluctant fiancés. Why not? A small answering smile curved Lyra's lips, and for just a moment, her patterns displayed a bright, unguarded flash of genuine interest. So, what's first on our royal engagement calendar? Alex asked. The Crystal Garden alignment, Lyra replied. A simple ritual to begin the pairing's spiritual preparation. Cool me. I will show you. As Alex followed her from the chamber, EDI whispered, Captain, may I suggest keeping an eye on Lord Kalen? His patterns displayed intentions that my cultural analysis subroutine flagged as deeply concerning. Add it to the list, EDI. Add it to the list. The Crystal Garden turned out to be one of the most beautiful places Alex had ever seen. A vast, open space at the heart of the Royal Tower where thousands of crystals grew like plants, each emanating soft light in different hues. Some were tiny, barely saplings, while others towered overhead like ancient trees, all pulsed with gentle rhythms that somehow combined into a harmonious whole. The crystals are semi-sentient, Lyra explained as she led Alex along pathways of smoothly polished stone. They respond to emotions, intentions, and energy flows. Many are older than our written history. They record memories in ways we cannot fully comprehend. They're incredible, Alex admitted, genuinely awed despite his situation. What do we do here exactly? The alignment is simple. We meditate while tending to young crystals, encouraging them to grow in response to our combined energies. It is meant to be the first step in harmonizing a newly paired couple. Simple, it turned out, was a relative term. While Lyra sat gracefully before a cluster of small crystals, hands hovering above them with perfect control as they responded to her energy by growing visibly and changing colors, Alex struggled to produce any effect at all. "You are thinking too much," Lyra observed after watching his frustrated attempts. "The crystals respond to feeling, not calculation. Where I come from, feelings don't make rocks grow," Alex replied, then immediately regretted the edge in his voice. This is all just very different from what I'm used to." Lyra's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is the problem. You're trying to make the crystals grow your way, rather than connecting with them as they are." She moved closer, her presence bringing a subtle warmth Alex hadn't expected. "May I?" After his hesitant nod, Lyra placed her hands gently over his, guiding them into position above the tiny crystals. The contact sent a surprising tingle up his arms, not unpleasant, but definitely alien. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Feel the energy that flows through all things. On Xylos, it is merely more accessible than on other worlds." Alex did as instructed, expecting nothing. But after a moment of quiet, he became aware of something, a subtle vibration, a presence that wasn't quite physical. Under Lyra's guidance, he let his awareness follow this sensation, reaching out without quite knowing how. When he opened his eyes, the crystals beneath his hands had grown several inches and were glowing with a soft blue light. "I did that?" he asked, startled. "We did," Lyra corrected, her patterns displaying what might have been pleased surprise. "Your energy signature is unusual, wild, untamed by our standards, but not incompatible." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of several royal advisors, their patterns displaying urgent messaging. "What is it?" Lyra asked, her formal demeanor returning instantly. "The initial synaptic joining must be moved forward," the lead advisor announced. "The celestial conjunction approaches more rapidly than calculated." Lyra's patterns flashed with alarm before settling. "So soon?" "But the traditional preparation period cannot be observed in full, Highness. The cosmic alignment will not wait." After the advisors departed, Alex turned to Lyra. "Synaptic joining? That sounds invasive." "It is not physical," Lyra assured him, though her patterns betrayed concern. "It is a preliminary ritual meant to create a basic resonance between paired minds. Normally, it occurs after weeks of preparation, allowing for a gentle, controlled experience. And instead, we must proceed immediately with minimal preparation. It may be more intense than usual." "Define intense," Alex said warily. Lyra's patterns shifted to colors he hadn't seen before, deep indigos and violets that suggested complexity and perhaps apprehension. Normally, the joining creates a superficial harmony, shared surface thoughts, compatible emotional states. But rushed, with our energies barely aligned. She hesitated. "It could reach deeper. Memories, core emotions, fundamental self-concepts." "You mean it could make us read each other's minds? Actually see into each other's souls, or whatever the Xylan equivalent is?" "Not precisely, but not entirely inaccurately either." Alex ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit that made his royal garments ripple in response. "Is there any way around this?" "None that would not immediately flag our pairing as invalid and trigger Kalen's challenge before we are prepared." Lyra's patterns settled into determination. "I do not ask this lightly, Alex Rider, but for both our sakes, we must proceed." The synaptic joining chamber was smaller than Alex had expected, an intimate space deep within the tower, its walls lined with crystals that hummed at frequencies just beyond comfortable hearing. At its center stood two crystalline chairs facing each other, connected by what looked like threads of solidified light. As Lyra had explained en route, the ritual normally involved touching specific resonance crystals while reciting ancient phrases, a ceremonial way of creating a superficial psychic connection. But due to the rushed timeline, they would be using a more direct method involving the chamber's built-in amplification systems. Remember, Lyra instructed as they took their seats, try to focus on calm, surface thoughts. The connection should be minimal if we both maintain control. Alex nodded, trying to clear his mind as Xylan technicians adjusted controls around them. Just don't blame me if you see something weird. My life hasn't exactly been normal. Nor has mine, Lyra replied with unexpected wryness, her patterns briefly displaying what might have been humor. The technicians finished their preparations and withdrew, leaving Alex and Lyra alone in the chamber. The humming of the crystals intensified, making Alex's teeth vibrate slightly. We begin on the third resonance, Lyra said. Simply touch the armrest when the tone changes and try to remain calm. The first tone sounded deep and somehow both inside and outside Alex's head simultaneously. The second followed, higher and sharper. As the third tone began, they both placed their hands on their respective armrests. The effect was immediate and nothing like Lyra had described. Instead of a gentle connection, Alex felt a surge of energy coursing through him. Wild, uncontrolled, and overwhelming. The part of his mind that could still form coherent thoughts realized what was happening. His human biology was interacting with the Xylan technology in completely unpredicted ways. And then there was no more room for analysis, because Lyra's mind crashed into his like a tidal wave. He saw / felt / experienced flashes of her life. The crushing weight of royal responsibility placed on her since childhood, the loneliness of a position that kept her separate even from her own people, her secret studies of off-world cultures, her fear of failing her duty, her deeper fear that fulfilling it would extinguish something essential in herself. Simultaneously, he knew she was experiencing his memories, his parents' early death, the struggles to keep his freight business alive in a galaxy dominated by megacorporations, the endless string of ports where he knew no one, the technical ingenuity that had saved his life countless times, the core of stubborn kindness he'd managed to maintain despite everything. It lasted only seconds, but felt like lifetimes. When the connection broke, they both slumped in their chairs, gasping. That was... Alex began, unable to find words. Unexpected, Lyra finished, her patterns chaotic with processing. The resonance was far deeper than intended. Their eyes met across the space between their chairs, and Alex realized something fundamental had changed. The alien princess no longer seemed quite so alien. He had felt her essence, understood her fears and hopes in a way that transcended language or culture. And she had seen him, truly seen him, perhaps more clearly than anyone ever had. The awkwardness that had characterized their interactions was gone, replaced by something far more complex. Not romantic love, nothing so simple or immediate, but a profound recognition of each other as people, not just roles or representatives of their species. "Your Highness," a technician interrupted, entering the chamber with obvious concern. The readings were within acceptable parameters. Lyra finished firmly, her formal demeanor snapping back into place. "We will retire to recover. No reports of anomalies are necessary." As they left the chamber, walking side by side through the tower corridors, neither spoke immediately. There was no need, and perhaps too much to say. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "So, that happened." A small, genuine smile curved Lyra's lips. "Indeed it did. I believe the human expression is, well, this is awkward." Alex couldn't help laughing, the tension breaking. "Pretty much, yeah. Nothing like having your entire life exposed to a stranger." "Are we still strangers?" Lyra asked, her tone surprisingly vulnerable. He considered the question seriously. "No," he answered finally. "I don't think we are. I'm not sure what we are, but not strangers." Over the next several days, a strange new pattern emerged. Officially, Alex and Lyra continued through the required pre-pairing rituals, attending astronomical observances in the star mapping chamber, participating in formal dinners where Alex mostly tried not to use the wrong crystalline utensil, learning the basics of court protocol. But in the spaces between official functions, something else developed. Real conversations. Moments of genuine connection. Even, surprisingly, laughter. Lyra was fascinated by Earth customs and technology, asking endless questions about everything from human music to spacecraft propulsion systems. Alex found himself equally curious about Xylan culture once he got past its intimidating formality. "So your people actually navigate by sensing energy fields?" he asked one evening as they sat in a small garden atop one of the tower's spires, watching the moons rise over the floating islands. "We perceive them as naturally as you see light," Lyra explained, demonstrating by causing small ripples in the air with a gesture. "It is why our architecture seems impossible by physical standards. The buildings are partially supported by manipulated energy. That explains why my ship's sensors went haywire when we entered the atmosphere. The energy readings were off the charts." "Your vessel," Lyra said carefully, her patterns shifting to something like concern. "Do you still intend to repair it?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. In the rush of events, Alex had almost forgotten his initial goal, to fix his ship and continue his freight run. "I should," he answered honestly. "I have commitments. Cargo that needs delivering. People expecting me." "Of course." Lyra's patterns settled into formal blues, the distance between them suddenly widening again. "Your life beyond Xylos. It was short-sighted of me to forget." Alex was surprised by the twinge of regret he felt at her withdrawal. "That doesn't mean I'm in a rush to leave, especially with this whole ritual situation unresolved." Before Lyra could respond, a servant appeared with a formal announcement. "Lord Kalen requests an audience with the royal pair." Lyra's patterns flashed with alarm before settling. "We will receive him here." Kalen arrived moments later, his tall frame silhouetted against the evening sky, patterns controlled, but with undercurrents of dark purpose that Alex could now recognize. "The celestial alignment approaches," Kalen announced without preamble. "Yet I observe concerning disharmonies in the cosmic order." "What disharmonies do you perceive, Lord Kalen?" Lyra asked, her voice cool, but patterns alert. "An off-worlder, untouched by the stellar confluence, claiming the royal pairing? The ancient prophecies speak of such disruptions as harbingers of catastrophe." Kalen's patterns shifted to display formal, ritualistic configurations. "As is my right by ancient law, I invoke the soul challenge. Let the true nature of this pairing be tested before all Xylos." The formal declaration hung in the air like a thundercloud. Alex looked to Lyra, whose patterns had gone completely still, a sign, he now knew, of intense control over strong emotion. "You're challenging our engagement?" Alex asked, deliberately using the human term. "On what grounds exactly?" "Cosmic incompatibility," Kalen replied, smoothly. "The off-worlder cannot possibly resonate with Xylan energy at the level required for royal pairing. The ritual was an aberration, a cosmic hiccup that must be corrected before imbalance spreads." "And if we refuse the challenge?" Lyra asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Refusal is admission of incompatibility. The pairing would be dissolved, and tradition would dictate that the royal house acknowledge its error through ritual concession." Kalen's patterns briefly displayed satisfaction before returning to formal neutrality. "Traditionally, this would include accepting the next most compatible match, myself, as the rightful pair." Lyra's patterns flashed with indignation. "You overreach, Lord Kalen. The soul challenge has not been invoked in 7 generations. Extraordinary circumstances demand extraordinary measures, Highness." Kalen bowed formally. "The challenge will commence at the next alignment, 2 rotations from now. I suggest the off-worlder prepare as best he can, though I doubt any preparation will suffice." After Kalen departed, Alex turned to Lyra. "So that just happened. Want to tell me exactly what I'm in for?" Lyra's patterns had shifted to troubled indigos and violets. The Soul Challenge is an ancient ritual rarely invoked. It tests not merely physical prowess, but spiritual and energetic compatibility. It takes place in the crystal arena, where the boundary between physical and spiritual reality is permeable, meaning, meaning your deepest fears, doubts, and weaknesses will be made manifest, as will mine. We must face them together while Kalen attempts to prove our fundamental incompatibility. Alex ran a hand through his hair, and if he succeeds, then the pairing is dissolved. I would likely be paired with Kalen instead, as he has positioned himself as the alternative candidate. And you, she hesitated. You would be free to leave Xylos, though perhaps not in the best condition. And if we succeed, then our pairing would be confirmed beyond challenge. No one could question it again. Lyra's patterns shifted to something like determination. We have 2 days to prepare. We should begin immediately. The next 2 days were the most intense of Alex's life. Lyra introduced him to a crash course in Xylan energy manipulation, techniques that usually took years to master. While Alex could only grasp the basics, he found that the synaptic joining had created a foundation they could build upon. Focus on the connection between us, Lyra instructed as they practiced in a private training chamber. The challenge will attempt to separate us, to prove we cannot function in harmony. We must maintain our bond regardless of what we face. Alex struggled with the abstract concepts, but found he could sense Lyra's energy in a way that defied logical explanation. It was like seeing a new color or hearing a note that shouldn't exist, impossible to describe, but undeniably real. During one particularly grueling session, as Alex attempted to harmonize his energy with Lyra's to move a small crystal, EDI spoke up from the multi-tool. "Captain, I've been analyzing the energy patterns in this chamber. There appears to be a resonance frequency between your biorhythms and Princess Lyra's that shouldn't technically be possible given your different physiologies." "Meaning?" Alex asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Meaning either my sensors are malfunctioning or the cosmic compatibility Lord Kalen dismisses might actually have some scientific basis." EDI paused. "Also, he has increased surveillance on both of you by 72% since declaring the challenge. My security protocols have detected multiple attempts to access my systems." Lyra's patterns flashed with alarm. "He seeks advantages. Knowledge of your technology would give him an edge in the challenge." "EDI, full lockdown," Alex commanded. "No external access under any circumstances." "Already implemented, Captain. Though I should note that Lord Kalen's efforts suggest a level of desperation that borders on concerning." That evening, exhausted from training, Alex and Lyra found themselves on the same tower spire, watching the stars. The impending challenge hung between them like a shadow. "What happens after?" Alex asked suddenly. "If we win, what then?" Lyra's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "Traditionally, the full pairing ceremony would follow. We would be officially bound according to Xylan law." "Married," Alex translated. "Yes, though what that means for an off-worlder and a princess, I do not know." Her patterns displayed brief vulnerability. "No precedent exists." "I suppose we'd have to make it up as we go along," Alex replied, surprising himself with how non-terrifying the thought had become. "That would be unprecedented in Xylan society. We cherish tradition, structure, known outcomes. And yet here you are, paired with the most unpredictable variable in your entire system." Alex smiled wryly. Maybe the cosmos has a sense of humor after all. Lyra's patterns briefly flashed with what Alex now recognized as amusement. "Perhaps it does." Her expression grew serious again. "Alex, there's something you should know before the challenge. If we fail, if Kalen succeeds, he will likely ensure you cannot return to your ship. Your technology, your very presence, threatens his vision of Xylan purity. Are you saying he'd have me killed? Not directly, but there are ways to be lost within the crystal arena. Accidents that could be blamed on your own incompatibility with Xylan energy." Alex absorbed this with a grim nod. "Then I guess we'd better not fail." The morning of the challenge dawned with an unnatural stillness. Alex was awakened by Xylan attendants who dressed him in ceremonial garments, crystal-embedded fabric that responded to his emotional state with subtle color shifts, though nothing as expressive as Xylan patterns. "Well, Captain," EDI commented from the multi-tool, which Alex insisted on keeping despite the attendant's disapproval, "your probability of survival calculations have fluctuated wildly over the past 48 hours. Currently, they stand at approximately 63.2%. Better than when I crashed," Alex replied, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "True, though I feel compelled to point out that better than a spacecraft crash is perhaps not the most reassuring benchmark for life decisions." Alex was escorted to a preparation chamber where, to his surprise, Lyra awaited him. Her ceremonial attire was breathtaking. Living crystal that flowed around her form like water, responding to her patterns with complementary illumination. "You look—" Alex fumbled for words. "Incredible" seemed inadequate, otherworldly too obvious, and beautiful too human a concept. Lyra saved him from his linguistic struggle with a small smile. "As do you. The Crystal Lord's attire suits you better than you might expect. Is there anything I should know before we do this?" Alex asked, the reality of what they faced settling over him. "Only this," Lyra replied, her patterns intense. "Whatever happens in the arena, whatever we see or experience, remember that it is not merely real or unreal. It is both. The Xylan understanding of reality is more flexible than yours. Trust what you feel more than what you see." That's not exactly comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Her patterns briefly touched his hand, a gesture of surprising intimacy by Xylan standards. "But perhaps this is— I am— Glel. It was you who interrupted my ceremony, Alex Ryder. Whatever comes." Before Alex could respond, ceremonial horns sounded, calling them to the arena. The Crystal Arena was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. A vast coliseum made entirely of living crystal, with thousands of Xylans seated in ascending rings around a central field. The field itself was bare except for a massive crystal formation at its center, the core, as Lyra had called it, the heart of the challenge. As Alex and Lyra entered from one side of the arena, Kalen appeared from the opposite entrance, his ceremonial attire more martial than royal, patterns displaying absolute confidence. From a high platform, a council of elders oversaw the proceedings. Ancient Xylans whose patterns were so complex and layered they were almost impossible to read. "The Soul Challenge begins," announced the lead elder, voice echoing without apparent amplification. "The cosmic balance will judge true resonance. May harmony prevail." At that signal, the arena itself came alive. The crystal floor beneath their feet began to glow and shift, transforming from solid matter into a landscape of light and shadow. Illusion and reality merged into something beyond either. "Stay close," Lyra whispered as the transformation completed. They now stood at the edge of what appeared to be a vast labyrinth of crystal and mist, constantly shifting and changing. "The first stage, the Gauntlet of Doubt, will try to separate us. We must reach the core together." The labyrinth was as much psychological as physical. As they ventured forward, the mists around them began to take forms, shapes drawn from their own minds, manifestations of their deepest doubts and fears. Alex watched in horror as the mist before him coalesced into the burning wreckage of spacecraft. Not just the rusty comet, but every ship he'd ever lost, every failure he'd ever experienced. Phantom voices accused him of incompetence, of being an imposter who'd somehow stumbled through life on luck rather than skill. Beside him, Lyra faced her own manifestations, expectations of her royal house, the weight of tradition, faces of disappointed subjects fading in and out of the mist. "They're not real," Alex reminded her, grasping her hand as they pushed forward. "They're not physical," Lyra corrected, "but they are drawn from truth. That is what makes them powerful. The challenge finds what we hide, even from ourselves." They pressed deeper into the labyrinth, facing increasingly personal specters. Alex confronted visions of complete isolation, being forever the outsider, the drifter with no home. Lyra faced manifestations of royal failure, her people suffering from decisions she had yet to make. Through it all, they maintained physical contact, the connection between them somehow keeping the worst of the visions at bay. When Alex faltered before a particularly devastating illusion, Lyra's steady presence guided him through. When her steps slowed before her own demons, his stubborn determination pulled her forward. "We're being herded," Alex realized after they navigated a particularly difficult section. "These aren't random obstacles. They're steering us away from the core." Lyra studied the shifting paths. "You're right. Kalen's influence directing the challenge energies." Speaking of Kalen, they had yet to see him since entering the labyrinth, though occasionally Alex thought he glimpsed a shadow moving parallel to their path, just out of clear view. "If he's redirecting the paths," Alex began. "Then we need not follow them at all," Lyra finished, understanding immediately. "The labyrinth is partially illusion. If we focus on our connection rather than our physical surroundings." Alex nodded, recalling their practice sessions. "We make our own path." Joining hands more firmly, they closed their eyes and reached for that strange, impossible resonance between them. Alex felt it immediately. The connection stronger than before, a bridge between minds and hearts that transcended physical reality. When they opened their eyes, the labyrinth had changed. The path before them now led directly to the core, though it was guarded by even more intense manifestations. "He knows what we're doing," Lyra warned as they advanced. "The final obstacles will be—" She didn't get to finish. The mist before them coalesced into a vision so powerful it stopped them both in their tracks. It showed two futures side by side. In one, Lyra ruled Xylos alongside Kalen, her people prosperous and peaceful, traditions preserved, cosmic balance maintained. In the other, she stood with Alex, facing civil unrest, cultural upheaval, the uncertain consequences of breaking with millennia of tradition. Beside it appeared Alex's counterpart vision, a life of freedom among the stars, continuing his existence as he always had, unfettered by responsibility or attachment, against a life bound to an alien world and its princess, forever an outsider, forever adjusting to customs he could never fully understand. "The choice reflection," Lyra whispered. "The final test before the core." They stood transfixed, each seeing not only their own potential futures, but understanding what the other faced as well. The comfort of the familiar against the risk of the unknown. Kalen's voice emerged from the mist, though his form remained hidden. "See the truth the cosmos reveals. Stability against chaos. Tradition against disruption. The natural order against cosmic aberration." Alex felt the pull of his solitary future, the freedom, the simplicity of returning to his old life. He looked at Lyra and saw her patterns shifting as she too contemplated the easier path. "We could walk away," he said quietly. "Both of us. You could do your duty. I could return to the stars. No one would blame us for following the sensible course." Lyra's patterns stilled as she studied both visions. "The sensible course," she repeated. "The expected pattern." Her eyes met his. "Is that what you want, Alex Rider?" The path already traveled. The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd experienced together. Alex looked again at the vision of his solitary future and realized something he hadn't before. It was familiar, yes, but also empty in ways he'd trained himself not to see. The endless ports, the temporary connections, the perpetual movement without arrival. "No," he answered, surprising himself with his certainty. "I crashed on your world by accident, but meeting you, that feels less like accident and more like pattern," Lyra finished. "A design beyond conventional understanding." As their resolution solidified, the visions before them began to waver and distort. They pressed forward hand in hand, pushing through the final barrier of mist toward the core. The core itself was a massive crystal, pulsing with energy that seemed to reach into dimensions beyond the physical. As they approached, Kalen finally appeared, stepping from the mist to block their path, his patterns displaying cold fury beneath ceremonial control. "This ends now," he declared. The off-worlder cannot possibly attune to the core. To attempt, it would risk catastrophic energy discharge. For Xylos' safety, I cannot allow it. The challenge is not yours to stop, Kalen, Lyra replied, her royal authority fully present. Step aside. Instead, Kalen raised his hands, channeling Xylan energy in a display of skill that made the air itself crackle with power. I invoke the right of interruption. The pairing threatens cosmic harmony. As guardian of tradition, I am bound to prevent it. The energy he unleashed was aimed not at them directly, but at the core itself, attempting to destabilize it, to create a reaction that would make their approach impossible or even deadly. He's trying to overload it, Lyra gasped, her patterns displaying alarm. If the core destabilizes during a challenge. Let me guess, Alex said grimly. Nothing good happens. Lyra raised her own hands, attempting to counter Kalen's energy with her own stabilizing force. But his position and preparation gave him the advantage. The core began to pulse erratically, cracks of unnatural light appearing in its structure. Alex, I cannot hold this alone, Lyra said through gritted teeth. But you cannot safely channel Xylan energy either. Maybe not, Alex replied, thinking frantically. But that connection between us, that's real. And my energy, whatever it is, affects yours. You said it yourself. Wild, untamed, but not incompatible. Understanding flashed in Lyra's eyes. Without further discussion, Alex stepped behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. The contact was electric, the resonance between them intensifying instantly. I don't know how to control energy like you do, Alex said, but I know how to fly impossible maneuvers, how to patch systems that should have failed, how to find solutions where none should exist. So you be the control, and you be the power, Lyra finished, her patterns merging with the energy around them. What happened next defied explanation. Through their connection, Alex's raw human determination and adaptability flowed into Lyra's precise Xylan control. The combination created something entirely new. Energy that was neither human nor Xylan, but something beyond both, wild yet directed, chaotic yet purposeful. It surged through Lyra's extended hands toward the core, not fighting Kalen's energy, but somehow incorporating it, transforming it, redirecting it back into the core in a stabilizing pattern that no single species could have created. The core absorbed the combined energy and then, instead of shattering, began to glow with unprecedented brilliance. It pulsed once, twice, then emitted a blinding flash that engulfed the entire arena. When the light faded, Alex and Lyra stood before the now calm core, still connected, while Kalen had been pushed back to the edge of the field, his patterns displaying shock and disbelief. From their platform, the Council of Elders rose as one, their patterns synchronized in formal acknowledgement. The challenge is completed, the lead elder announced. The core has responded with clarity beyond question. The pairing is confirmed, harmony achieved through difference rather than similarity. A new pattern emerges. The spectating Xylans erupted in displays of pattern light, some clearly celebratory, others confused or concerned, but none questioning the outcome. The sole challenge had spoken. Kalen, his defeat absolute and public, dropped to one knee in formal submission, though his patterns betrayed his inner fury. The cosmic balance has spoken, he stated, the ritualistic acknowledgement clearly costing him greatly. I withdraw my challenge. As they left the arena, surrounded by crystal guards and followed by murmuring crowds, Alex felt drained yet strangely invigorated. Beside him, Lyra walked with her royal composure intact, but her patterns displayed a complex mix of emotions, relief, wonder, and something deeper that had no easy translation. So, Alex said when they finally reached the privacy of a royal antechamber, I guess we're officially engaged now? By cosmic decree and everything. Lyra's formal demeanor softened, her patterns shifting to colors Alex had come to associate with her true self rather than her royal persona. Indeed, the universe itself appears to approve of our match, unlikely as it may seem. And what happens now? Alex asked, the reality of their situation settling in anew. The full ceremony, I assume? Yes, though that is largely formulaic after the challenge. The true question is what follows. Lyra's patterns displayed thoughtful consideration. You still have a ship to repair, cargo to deliver, a life beyond Xylos. And you have a kingdom to help rule, traditions to uphold, duties to fulfill. They stood in silence for a moment, the impossible complexity of their situation hanging between them. Perhaps, Lyra said finally, we need not solve everything at once. The universe brought us together through the most improbable of circumstances. Perhaps we should trust it to show us the next step as well. Alex smiled, feeling the weight lift slightly from his shoulders. Make it up as we go along. Precisely. Lyra's patterns shifted to something warmer, more personal. One day at a time, one challenge at a time. After all, we have already proven ourselves remarkably adaptable. The formal pairing ceremony took place 3 days later, a spectacle of light and crystal that drew Xylans from across the floating islands. Alex understood perhaps a third of the ritualistic proceedings, but he followed Lyra's lead, speaking the ancient phrases Edi translated for him and performing the symbolic exchanges with something approaching grace. What struck him most was the subtle shift in the Xylan's reaction to him. Where once there had been shock or disdain, now there was cautious curiosity. The soul challenge had proven something even the most traditional could not deny. This strange alien and their princess shared a connection that transcended conventional understanding. That evening, at the formal reception in the Crystal Garden, Alex found a moment of relative privacy with Lyra among the towering crystal growths. So, he said, still adjusting to the formal Xylan attire that now responded more smoothly to his emotions, I'm officially a royal consort. That's going to look interesting on my freight license renewal. Lyra's patterns displayed genuine amusement. Indeed, and I am paired with an off-world cargo hauler. The Council of Elders is still processing the reality, I believe. They shared a moment of companionable silence, watching the crystals glow in response to the celebration around them. I've been thinking, Alex said finally, about the ship repairs. Your engineers have been helping, and they've made progress, but some of the parts one need don't exist on Xylos. You need to leave, Lyra stated, her patterns carefully controlled. I need to make a supply run, Alex corrected, to get the parts, fulfill my cargo contract, and he hesitated, and make arrangements. If I'm going to be spending more time on Xylos, there are things I need to settle elsewhere. Lyra studied him, her patterns shifting through subtle emotional states. You intend to return then? Well, yeah. We're married by cosmic decree, remember? I'm pretty sure disappearing on your alien princess wife is bad form in any star system. His joke masked the deeper truth that the thought of not returning hadn't even occurred to him. And after you return? Lyra asked, the question touching on the larger uncertainties they had yet to resolve. One step at a time, remember? Alex reached out, briefly touching her hand, and what he'd learned was a significant gesture in Xylan culture. But I'm thinking maybe the Rusty Comet could use a home base for a while. Somewhere with interesting energy fields and impossibly beautiful floating islands. Lyra's patterns brightened with unmistakable pleasure. A most logical consideration, and perhaps a royal princess might benefit from occasional diplomatic missions to other worlds. For cultural exchange purposes, of course. Of course, Alex agreed, smiling. Strictly diplomatic. Edi's voice emerged from the multi-tool, which Alex now wore incorporated into his royal attire, much to the fascination of Xylan engineers. I've been calculating the probability of success for this unorthodox arrangement, Captain. The variables are numerous and highly unpredictable. And Alex prompted, and the projection fluctuates wildly, but trends positive, particularly when factoring in the apparently non-zero influence of cosmic compatibility. Alex laughed, the sound drawing curious pattern shifts from nearby Xylans. In other words, even you don't know what happens next. An accurate assessment, EDI confirmed, though I am curious to find out. As am I, Lyra agreed, her patterns displaying a complexity of emotion that matched Alex's own feelings. Uncertainty mixed with anticipation, challenges balanced by possibilities. Later that night, they stood on what had become their favorite tower spire, looking out over the floating islands of Xylos, now Alex's part-time home by the strangest of circumstances. You know, he said, when I crashed here, this was literally the last outcome I could have imagined. The universe has patterns beyond our comprehension, Lyra replied, her philosophical side emerging. Perhaps some encounters are written in the stars long before we recognize them. Or perhaps I just have spectacularly bad luck with navigation and unexpectedly good luck with everything else. Alex shook his head in wonder. I still can't believe I interrupted one ceremony and ended up married to a princess. Perhaps next time you will read the cultural briefing more carefully before visiting new planets, Lyra suggested, her patterns displaying teasing humor. Where's the fun in that? Alex countered with a grin. They lapsed into comfortable silence, watching the moons rise over their impossible shared future. Whatever challenges awaited, cultural differences, political complications, the fundamental strangeness of their situation, they would face them together, one step at a time. EDI broke the silence with characteristic timing. Captain, Princess, I feel obligated to note that this arrangement defies all logical probability models and reasonable expectations for interspecies relationships. Your point, Alex asked, merely that improbability seems to be a specialty of yours. Perhaps that is why the cosmic order approves. The universe, after all, has always favored the improbable over the impossible. Alex looked at Lyra, alien and familiar all at once, and felt the resonance between them, that inexplicable connection that had somehow been recognized by crystals and cosmic forces, and, most importantly, by themselves. To improbability, then, he said softly. Lyra's patterns shifted to colors that Alex now recognized as contentment tinged with anticipation, a perfect reflection of his own feelings. To improbability, she agreed. And whatever comes next, in the garden below, the crystals pulsed in harmonious rhythm, recording another memory in their ancient, living archive, the beginning of a story unlike any Xylos had ever known.